You don't get to ask questions after the nonsense you pulled on Nowhere.
I just saved Quill.
We've already established that you destroying the ship that I'm on is not saving me.
When did we establish?
Like 3 seconds ago!
No, I wasn't listening. I was thinking of something else.
Oh.
Howdy folks, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am your host, the Mighty Bjorn, and today for you I'm going to be taking time and doing a review of Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy. This is the PC version, although it is on many other platforms, but primarily focusing on PC because that's really all I can quote on. Let's take a bit of a dive into it here. The developer is Eidos Montreal, the publisher is Square-Enix, and I do have to say I was really actually apprehensive about this game because of Eidos Montreal, Square-Enix, and the debacle that is Marvel's Avengers, which I was deeply into. So, yeah, when I heard who the publisher was going to be and who the developer was going to be, I just kind of did a, oh boy, here we go again. However, that being said, I can't say I was actually fully disappointed. Let me dive more on into it here. The platforms it was released for was Windows PC, Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox One, and Xbox X Series. Say that 5 times fast, folks. It was released on just about everything, except for Stadia and Lynx. Pretty much. It was released October 26, 2021. Admittedly speaking, though, I only recently got it, and it was mostly because I had money burning a hole in my pocket, and it was on sale for a good price during the Steam's winter sale. Now, that being said, the plot is, well, it's a very comic book plot. You're playing as the Guardians of the Galaxy. You have Star-Lord. You're only controlling Star-Lord. But you also have Rocket Raccoon. You have Drax the Destroyer, Groot, and Gamora. And essentially, they're kind of like your special attacks, which is on like a cooldown timer. And more or less, that's really all they do. They're more or less for moral support, story, if you will, things of that nature. They're not really, you know, you don't really take control of any of the other characters. Now the cool thing is what they were able to do was blend in different things that the different characters can do, such as Rocket. He can climb through air vents, and he's got explosives. He can also hack computer consoles. Groot primarily just makes bridges with his arms, tree arms things. And he can also raise platforms as well. So the characters are also used to solve different puzzles in the game. Gamora can cut through different types of stuff. Drax the Destroyer as well. Drax the Destroyer is just a mule. He just picks stuff up, carries it wherever you want him to carry it to, and that's what he does. Nothing super special. Now, the whole plot is you unleash the Soul Stone from a quarantine zone, a no-fly zone essentially, and which releases Magus. And there's this whole thing with the Universal Church of Truth and Magus taking over Nikki, which then Magus gets free from Nikki and goes into Adam Warlock. And well, I really don't want to dive too deep into the plot because I just ruin it for you. But the story is good, I'll say that much. It's got a really interesting plot. Now, when it comes to the music, the things I like, the things I dislike, the music was awesome. I mean, the music was really, really awesome. I mean, you had stuff in there. You had Joan Jett in there. You had Kiss in there. Motley Crue. You had Billy Idol. You know, a lot of popular music from the 80s, essentially. There was a couple songs there, I think, was late 70s, but it was primarily 80s, period. You even had Flock of Seagulls in there, which, oh my God, Flock of Seagulls in the 80s. I mean, like, And sometimes I wonder if that wasn't the only band in the 80s, the way people talk about the 80s and Flock of Seagulls. Now, it does have your typical Marvel film, MCU type movie score, which, once again, when they play the different parts, the different types of music, it just works the way it plays out. I mean, even the part with Flock of Seagulls, you know, I Run Away, or whatever the hell the song is called, Run Away. Literally, you're running away from somebody. So it's like, and the way they just do the music and the music scores is just really good. Now, for controls, you have keyboard, mouse, and then you have controller. Personally, I recommend controller. Keyboard and mouse. Looking at footage of people playing Guardians of the Galaxy with keyboard and mouse, it just looks like a nightmare trying to play this game with a keyboard and mouse. It doesn't. The game's combat system really isn't fluent as it is, and that's actually one thing I was kind of disappointed in, was the combat system itself, especially with how you get the other members to use their different types of special attacks, where it's like, I got to hit this key, and then I got to hit this key, and then I got to hit this key, and they'll finally do what I tell them to do. Now, time does slow down when you're doing all that, but it does kind of break up the pace of the combat. It's not really quick to do. I would say with a mouse, with a controller, it's a lot easier, because when it comes to doing stuff like that, a controller is much more ergonomic than a keyboard and mouse. Keyboard and mouse, I've always said keyboard and mouse is great for like first-person shooter games where you need that quick snap-on aim. But outside of that, really, keyboard and mouse, in my opinion, has never really been the best way for gaming, especially when it comes to action games and driving games. That's just me. And when it comes to Guardians of the Galaxy, that really hasn't changed my opinion about that. No matter what happens, we do not retreat. The sounds, they're okay for the most part. They're nothing amazing. I would actually say the sounds itself was a little disappointing, and sometimes the sounds, in my opinion, just fall flat on its face, especially when it comes to Peter Quill's element guns, when you're not using one of the different types of elements that you get for the guns. Like when you're just using like your like straight up blaster mode, it's not really that good. It just falls flat on its face at times, actually, when it comes to the sound effects. That being said, the game is a bit more faithful to the comic books. Straight up, it is definitely more faithful to the comic books than the movies were. And it's definitely heavily influenced by the comics. I would say the push to make this game had to come from the success of the movies, considering they announced the game in, like, actually the first announcement of Guardians of the Galaxy was in 2017. Which would have been just a few years after the first movie, and essentially that's actually when like the MCU was really at its height on how successful it was. Not saying the MCU isn't successful now, but the decision to make this game was during the height of its success. And that being said, it also introduces some of the characters that you don't see in the movies, such as Cosmo, Captain Glory, Lady Hellbender, Fin Fang Foom, and it even mentions Yondu and Galactus. So to me, that was all really cool, especially in the context that, like, when they talked about Galactus, the group was having a conversation, and it came up that it's like, why doesn't Galactus intervene? He's literally the most powerful being in the galaxy. And it's like, well, yeah, that's actually a good question, except for, well, Galactus doesn't really care as long as there's still plants for him to feed on. So there's that. It does have a really awesome story. I have to say that. I mean, top-notch story. I was pretty well engrossed in the story throughout the whole game, and I was always constantly like wondering, like, okay, where's this going to go next? What direction are they going? Stuff like that. So the story was really good. This is probably, I really hype up Kingdom Come Deliverance and its story, and it's honestly probably ranking with Kingdom Come Deliverance in my opinion when it comes to story in the game. Now, it doesn't have as much freedom as Kingdom Come Deliverance, which is kind of one of my gripes, but that's okay. It does have a stream safe mode if you really care about that kind of stuff. I do want to throw that out there. That's something that I haven't really seen any of the other reviewers talking about it, but there's a streamer safe mode because there's licensed music in the game. Like I said earlier about a lot of music from the 80s and stuff like that. Rock and roll, metal, even some pop music from the 80s. And that essentially they put in a streamer safe mode so that music doesn't play during your gameplay. So for those of you that are into streaming and all that stuff, this is actually safe to stream. And when you go in your options, you got to go in your sound options, and there actually is a section there for licensed music. If you turn it off, then it turns on streamer safe mode. And that being said, all in all, it is a really meaty game. To get through the game, it took me about 20 hours, and I didn't get everything. I didn't find all the collectibles. I found a big majority of the collectibles, and I found a big majority of the costumes, but there was still stuff I missed. And there was even some dialogue because, like, when you're going through the missions, the members will talk to each other. Sometimes, like when you're just on the ship, the crewmates will talk to each other, stuff like that. So there's a lot of conversation, and realistically, I'd have no idea what it would take to hear it all. Now, of course, you're going to hear all the important parts. And for the majority of it, I did hear a big majority of the conversations. I'm just not going to sit here and say I've heard every single thing that every single character had to say in the game, because there's a lot. There's a lot of dialogue in this game. And that being said, I also kind of felt that was at times a bit of a down point, is that some of the story parts and dialogue parts was really long. And it would get to the point where it would start to drag on. Then luckily the pace would change, the scenery would change, just what was going on in the game would change. And then my interest would re-peak. So they actually did a really good job with the pacing in general for the game. But there's some other parts where they kind of fussed up the pacing. I'll get into that in a bit. Honestly, I feel the gameplay, though, wise, it's kind of mediocre, realistically. Now, when it comes to the puzzles are really simple. It's just like sitting there figuring out what you need right at that moment. It's either going to be something with Star-Lord's element guns, or it's going to be something with one of the other crewmates. And then it's just picking the right crewmate to do the job. But essentially, like when it comes, there's some flight sections, there are combat sections where you're flying around the Milano. They're not horrible, but they're not really good either. It kind of feels like to me that those sections, like, didn't have to be there at all. Like, if they just decided we're not going to have these sections, it would not have affected the outcome of the game, to be honest, in my opinion. And there's a bit of that here. The other thing I have to talk about is the QuickTime events. Those are just, like, they even happen during combat at times. Where it's like you might be trying to brawl with someone and they kind of block or like counter-strike you, and it brings up a QuickTime event. It is kind of annoying because it kind of does break the how the game feels. It breaks the fluidity of the combat. I understand what they were going for, especially when it comes to that happening in combat, where it's like you're duking it out with someone and suddenly they block your punch and you got to counter punch them and stuff like that. It makes the combat, they're trying to make the combat feel more, I guess, realistic, if you will. But in all honesty, they probably could have got away with doing something completely different than a QuickTime event, to be honest. They probably could have just made the melee combat better. I mean, the melee combat is literally one button, folks. That's it. One button does the melee combat. And that's also, well, the ranged is a little bit different. The other thing I really have to kind of, I feel about with the combat is the element guns. I think a broken toy gun would be more effective. I mean, damn, dude. Like, they're supposed to be like these super badass guns in the galaxy, and they're not really all that good, to be honest. They don't sound very good. Now, when you're shooting the element shots, they sound all right. But, like, when you're in the normal blaster mode, they're not very good, and they're not very effective, to be honest. It it felt like more often than not the game was actually defeating the enemies and not myself. That I was relying very heavily on using the special abilities of the different crew members. Either trapping the enemies, ensnaring the enemies, blasting them with AoE attacks, using power attacks with, you know, either Drax or Gamora. I mean, it's just like it felt more like the game was in control than I was, and it felt like the game was actually beating itself at times. I'm not saying the combat's easy. There is some times where I did struggle in combat, but generally speaking, on normal difficulty, I pretty well blew through most of the combat in this game. The boss battles were fun. They were a bit difficult, and essentially it was kind of one of those. It wasn't just go in there and bash the hell out of them because they had a lot of hit points. Although there was that too, but there was a little bit of a puzzle to it where it's like the battle for Fin Fein Foom. He had like all this ice. It kind of looked like armor all over his body, and he had to break up all those different sections of ice before you could attack Fin Fein Foom himself. And even the Squid Monster, that's just what I'm going to call it. I'm just going to call it the Squid Monster. It's like this giant octopus that you fight during the game, and you essentially had to beat the crap out of it and entrap its tentacles when it tried to slam you, and then, you know, pretty much beat the hell out of his tentacles until you got to the point where you got a quick time event to slice him off. Well, actually, Gamora would slice him off, but that's neither here nor there. So at times, it actually, more often than not, when it came to the combat, it felt like the game was doing most of the work, and I really wasn't doing much of anything. That really being said, if you're looking for a top-shelf action game, this game isn't for you. I'm sorry, folks. Was it still enjoyable? I mean, I personally still had a very enjoyable time playing it. I did enjoy the story, and I would definitely play this game again. So, yeah, I mean, you know, buy it, enjoy it. I personally recommend it. If you're into this sort of thing, I just want to put out there, though, that if you're buying this game, you're buying this game for the narrative. You're buying this game for the fact that it's the Guardians of the Galaxy. You're not buying this. You're not going to want to buy this game if you're looking for the next big wow in action games, because this is not it, for sure. Either ways, that being said, it is $60 on Steam for the regular version, folks. And that's actually the only version of this game I personally recommend buying. There is a deluxe edition, which is only $10 more. But here's the thing I am going to throw out there, and this is a thing I have also not seen reviewers talking about either. So with the deluxe edition, you supposedly get a digital comic, which I did not go looking for yet. I did not look over it or anything else. I just haven't had the time. But it's also supposed to come with the soundtrack, and it's supposed to come with 2 costumes for Star-Lord. Now, it does come with those 2 costumes for Star-Lord, but here's the trick about that. You can find those fucking costumes in the game. If you buy the deluxe edition, you won't find those in the game. But essentially, if you're buying it for those skins, you're wasting your money because you can already get them free in the game. You just got to get to the right stage and find the damn thing. Also, it says it comes with the soundtrack. Now, when they advertised the soundtrack for the game, it looked like to me, because they were talking about how, like, there's Kiss and Motley Crue and Billy Idol and all these other bands. And it was like, oh, yeah, that's fucking awesome, dude. There's a lot of good music there. A lot of 80s hard rock, heavy metal. I mean, even Iron Maiden's there, man. You know, so I was like, yeah, fuck yeah, this is metal. And then I found out, no, that's not what you're getting in the soundtrack. Now, what you are getting, it's still like hard rock, metalish type music, but it's related to this band called Star-Lord, which I think was just a band name they came up with for the game, to be honest. So I think it's just like heavy metal hard rock music that was literally made for the game. by some heavy metal band no one's ever heard of. So either ways, I would not recommend the deluxe edition of this game, to be honest. Like, if you're buying it for the music and you're buying it for the costumes, you've wasted your money. I'm not going to lie to you, folks. I don't want to do that. So honestly, but it's only $10 more for the deluxe edition. To be honest, I would wait. You know, wait till it's on sale. You know, buy it if you're looking for a game with a really good story. But I think with a game like this, if you're only looking for a game for a really good story, it's going to be a game you're going to play once, twice, and never play again. So I really don't even recommend spending the $60 on it.
Right.
I could easily see spending $40 on this. Great game for $40. Amazing game actually for $40, but 60's kind of meh. I think that's really pushing it. But anyway, folks, that is my review of Guardians of the Galaxy. It's not bad. It's not the second coming of Jesus, but it's not shit either. Anyway, folks, thank you very much for tuning in. Hopefully you all enjoyed the video, and have yourself a wonderful day.